Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us. I'm Emily Priest, and I'm here with my colleague Adam Flaherty, and welcome to today's webinar. For some background, Concurrent Engineering are one of the PCC resellers within the UK, providing solutions for CAD, PLM, technical documents, and the Internet of Things. I'm sure you've all had a look through the website where you can find further information on all of these, along with our webinar page where you can find upcoming and our previous on-demand webinars. You can also reach out to us on our social media and our blog, where we regularly send out information on software updates, new offers and news. So for today's webinar, we will be focusing on showcasing some tips and tricks using the new functionality within MathCAD Prime 4. The aim of the session is to give those of you who are new to MathCAD a quick overview of the benefits of the solution, and for those of you who are more experienced to learn more of what's new. So the agenda for today's presentation is performance enhancements in MathCAD Prime 4.0, securely communicating design intent and engineering knowledge, third-party app interoperability. We're going to create some templates for you as well, and some top tips for the new functionality. So the webinar is being recorded, and a link will be sent out to all of you later on this week. So I'll now hand over to Adam, who will be taking you through the presentation.
Thanks for the introduction, Emily. So hello everyone, and thanks for tuning into our MathCAD webinar today. In this session we're going to be covering some tips and tricks in the latest version of the software, which is Prime 4.0. As Emily mentioned in the agenda and on screen now, the number of interesting topics we're going to look at, but I'd just like to show a couple of slides as to explain what MathCAD is, just for those out there that may be limited on their exposure to the software. So from a top level, you can think of MathCAD as a digital engineering notebook that has a powerful math engine built into the back of it, okay, where you save all your design notes, perform all your calculations using natural math notation. This differs from other systems people maybe commonly are using, namely Excel, for example, where a lot of it is cell-based equations, cell-based math, and you spend a lot of time interrogating different spreadsheets, different cells, pairing parentheses and checking references. So it can take a bit of time. Whereas as MathCAD, there's no need for this, as math is displayed as you learnt it from a textbook or from a teacher, for example. This means that the calcs are easier to digest and share with colleagues, suppliers, etc. And there's no need for a specific computer language to use the software. Okay, so now that we've got a better understanding as to what MathCAD actually is, I just want to quickly cover a couple of slides now just to highlight the improved functionalities within this latest version of the software, just for those that may be on previous versions that are interested. So from the slide, we can see that we've got now content protection back in Prime 4.0. This is the first version of Prime to have content protection. This used to be a main staple in versions 14, 15. And as you can imagine, the ability to password protect and hide your calculations from display comes with many benefits. Prime 4.0 also has improved interoperability with other applications such as Microsoft Office tools. I'm going to highlight some of these examples during my demonstration. We've got overall general improved usability, so navigating the worksheets. There are a number of performance enhancements which I'm going to explain or show on the next slide. And we've now got Windows 10 support for the software. So coming back to those performance enhancements, if we just look at this slide here, this is showing the comparisons between 4.0 and other previous versions. Just one to highlight on here is regarding plotting. Prime 4.0 plots 2 million points per trace now versus 500,000 in previous versions of the software. Now, without further ado, let's get into the software. Okay, so this is MathCAD Prime 4.0. I've developed this worksheet to address the points highlighted in today's agenda, and we'll go through this in full detail during the demonstration. As we can see, it's a common engineering example, simply supported beam at 3 ends on both. Now, a good place to start would be talking about templates, the setting up of, creation of, etc. And there's a few things to consider with templates. Firstly, obviously, why should we use templates? Well, using templates increases efficiencies, reduces the time to create worksheets, and sets a standard across the organization. Many benefits to using them. Okay, so let's talk about the considerations to make when we are creating them. So first things to look at then regarding the template are document properties. Okay, if you go to the document tab, we can see that we've got page sizes, etc. Whether we want headers, footers, all this sort of stuff. Okay, whether we want to bring in areas, images, etc. We can predefine all of these entities for then the next user to then pick up and maybe just change some variables within that. Units are the next thing we should look at when making templates, because we could have multiple templates that use different unit systems. Okay, or we could apply whichever units built into the system, or custom units for that matter, onto the results data. Next on the list would be formatting, whether it's math formatting, how you want to display the results, the fonts used, highlight colors, text colors, etc. Same with text font formatting, what fonts, how you want it to be, justifications in the text regions. All of these should be considered for templates. So the last couple of pointers then on template creation would be one, the content itself. You develop different templates for different formula, for different mathematical studies, so that everybody can access those. And this is the next thing to consider then, would be how you want these people to access these templates. Okay, so obviously there'd be some input values required, namely obviously the variables. Okay, so you may want to give access to the users for those, or some of them at least. Whereas maybe the formula, we don't want anybody to touch that. We don't want it to tweak it, so we could protect this area here. As you can see, I've created these areas and I've placed these entities in these areas. So with this now, I can look at protecting this area. I can give it a password, so only obviously the admin know, and then can change and modify. I could show a timestamp from when it was last modified, this particular area, or at least last opened. And then I can then set whether I want the area to display expanded, so that people do get visibility of what's inside it, or I can collapse it. So maybe you don't want to show what's going on inside the area. That might be your company's intellectual property. So I can protect this area. As we can see, password protected area. And now when I try to open it, nothing happens. I need to right click and I need to unprotect, and it asks me for my password. And now we can open up the area again. I'd like to now talk about using third-party applications with MathCAD, primarily Excel, because this is the most common program that's used in conjunction with MathCAD, either bringing in data from Excel, writing data to Excel, or having an Excel component built into the MathCAD worksheet and using both pretty much at the same time. So to do this, we can look at our Input Output tab, and in here we have data import export. So we've got a couple of options here, and if we want to just bring in some data that's already been generated in Excel, I click the Read Data button, and ask me to browse for an Excel file. Luckily, I've got one prepared. I can bring that in, and then I can have a look at the data set. Okay, and I can choose where I want to bring in from, or what data I want to bring in. So if I grab all of this again, I can also I can type it in if I know the data set. I can go between worksheets if I have them. I insert that, and now this is what I get in MathCAD. It has got this data set associated. So what I can do here then is give this a variable definition. Okay, and now I can report this out in MathCAD, as we can see. With the data set now loaded into MathCAD, I can manipulate it in many ways. I could look at extracting individual elements or multiple elements from the matrix. I could look at grabbing different individual columns or multiple columns, a range of elements perhaps, and then I can use this data to run through various formula functions depending on my needs. So what we're going to look at now then is we're going to look at another further bit of functionality with the Excel functionality, and we're going to bring in an Excel component now, and we're going to see MathCAD and Excel working in conjunction, and then we can look at outputting data to Excel using this tool. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to change the size of this data so it'll still be visible so we can see what's going on. I'm going to continue to use this data. Now down here I'm going to bring in an Excel component. Okay, and as we can see we've got input area and an output area. Okay, so the inputs for this, right, I can right click here, or I can select up here to say insert input expression. Okay, so I'll do it here, and now it's saying okay, this Excel data is going to start at A1, and I'm going to say data, so that this file that I've read from Excel is going to go straight into this data, this Excel component. And as we can see, it's populated already with the values. And if I double click on this, it will then open Excel. It's an embedded worksheet, and I can now manipulate this data using Excel functionality, or I can add to this data, for example. Okay, so I could very just quickly just give some indexing. Okay, and I will then close this out, and you'll see it update in the Excel component. Now then, I'm going to bring this data in from the Excel worksheet into MathCAD by using this output expression, and I'm going to say that it's going to bring the Excel data from A1 through to C41, which is all of the complete range of the data. So if I now read this into MathCAD and report it out, we can see that we have the 3 columns. Okay, so now we're going to look at then how to then export data from from MathCAD into Excel, and I'm going to use this data2 data set that we've just created as an example. So with this, we're going to use a built-in function within the system. That MathCAD has over 700 built-in functions, and this is one of our tips as well, is that we have this user interface element here on, which is the all functions button. Okay, you'll see it loads in like this. Have it on at all times when using MathCAD, because it gives you quick access, and you got the search capabilities to look through all of the built-in functions. The one that we're interested in for this particular example is in the file access category in the list of built-in functions. The one we're looking for is this write Excel function here. We just click on it, it loads it into the worksheet, or we can hover over it as well, and the tooltip gives us an explanation of the arguments that is required. In this particular case, not all of the arguments are required. Get the right one. You'll see for a moment, if I want to just bring in the entire data set, I don't need to specify rows, columns, and range, but if I wanted to, I could. So with this now, I now specify, well, I'll give this a variable definition first, so I'll say this is out, and I will say I need to use inverted commas here then to make sure it's given it a string value, the name of the file. So I'll call this one out.xlsx, Okay, I will then say it's going to use data 2 as its data set, data 2, and I will remove these last arguments here. And with that, now that I've just pressed the enter button, if I were to go to my file explorer, we'll see that we have this out Excel file that's been created in my working directory. Okay, if I open this up, we'll see that it is the 3-column data set that we created using the Excel component. Now let's come back to MathCAD. So let's now go back to the original worksheet, have a look at it in a bit more detail, and we'll go through a couple more tips. So in this worksheet then, we've got the general formula for looking at end reaction moment, slope, deflection. Okay, we've also got total deflection, transverse shear, bending moment, slope equations. But here's a good example now, a good time now to talk about another feature that's new to Prime 4, which is dealing with these long formula that go over a couple of pages. Okay, previous versions we may have to reduce the font size or centrally position this formula. But in Prime 4 we now have the ability to do equation breaks. Okay, they're also in the operators. We've got them all in the major operators here, and we can select an operator somewhere in the formula to apply one of these equation breaks. Or we can get the system to do this if we just select a specific operator, like so, and it breaks the equation. So very useful for keeping your equations formula together on one page. So let's have a bit more of a look at what's going on. So we can see then, I've got some plots here. Let me just reduce my areas. Here's another thing that you could try to do is put things in areas to make the page a bit easier to digest, fewer pages, so it's less resource on the math engine. Okay, so we look at the plots. Okay, so obviously we've got deflection, we've got bending moment, transverse shear, slope. Okay, and formatting options come into play with these. We could look at put in vertical markers. Okay, you could get it to follow the argument, and we can maybe highlight what I've done here, highlight these orange sections for input values. We can edit this around and we see the markers move with it because I've put the variable definition in here. I've also, as you can see here, to assign a unit to the input marker, you divide it by the unit itself. So these markers now follow the plot. Another thing that's worth showing, a little tip perhaps, is this here. So I obviously looking at this scenario, I may want to change the material around, okay, to see which might be the best material for the job. So I've put a little very simple program using MathCAD programming, simple if statements to assign a value to E depending on what is selected for this variable here. So we've got steel, aluminium, nylon, all giving different E values, Young's modulus values, obviously returning with a unit associated. And with this we can see, if I bring in the deflection, slope, okay, we can see that we've got, okay, at 5, here, sorry, at 5 we've got minus 250 mil deflection, okay. So let's now change the material. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to disable this region, and then I'm going to bring in aluminium. I'm going to enable it, and we'll see that it does the recalculations, and because of the differing Young modulus value, we've got more deflection. So lastly, I just want to talk about a couple of more tips then when using MathCAD, especially Prime 4, this version. As I alluded to earlier, whenever we have units, for example, or any other thing that we can label, it's a pretty good idea to set label styles. Okay, so we can have variables, units, constants, functions, system words, system keywords, etc., formula keywords. So if we set the formatting of these, then they are easier to digest. Everybody knows what they're looking at. Okay, and again, as I said earlier, it makes it just come out the page a bit more, so it's easier to spot. Another bit of advice would be to look at how your worksheet is set to calculate. This worksheet that I have is on auto calculation, and every new sheet by default comes in as auto calculation. This can be seen away from this ribbon down here with this sort of green light. But what I can do is tell the system to not calculate this worksheet. I stop all calcs, this sort of green light turns off. Okay, and as we expect, okay, the system did its last calculations on this worksheet for aluminium. If I now change this back to or change it to nylon, take aluminium off, we'll see that it doesn't update. Because all the calcs are off. But then I can turn it back on, and it updates based on obviously the new parameters. Okay, so this allows us to. This will be a good scenario to think about where your worksheet takes some time to calculate, or you have some plots that may. You have a number of plots over a number of sheets that may slow down the performance of the worksheet, due to the nature of the data. And what you'll find is on these worksheet templates that people may set up, you may have, you most likely have multiple input parameters or input values. So instead of editing one and the system recalculates the whole sheet for that new value, turn off all your calculations, edit all of the values, and then turn it on at that point there. Then it will recalculate with all of them, all of the new values, as opposed to one at a time, and you're waiting for that recalc after every input. And the last thing to talk about then would be keyboard shortcuts. MathCAD is very heavy on keyboard shortcuts. The super users of the world will barely use their mouse. You can see the keyboard shortcuts for every item that has one by hovering over it, and you'll see it in a tooltip, okay, in these parentheses. Okay, Control Shift V for this one, for example. Or if you want the full list of them, you can go to the Resources tab, and they are in a document here that loads up. And then obviously it lists all of the keyboard shortcuts, so you can print that out and have it as a quick sheet. So with that comes the end of the demonstration. I'm now going to pass you back to Emily, and she's going to see if anybody's posted any questions.
Thank you, Adam. Yeah, there are a couple of questions here, and I think we have got time to go through a couple here. So we have downloaded the trial of MathCAD Express. So what are the differences between this and the full version?
Okay, good question. So MathCAD Express is the free version that you can use for MathCAD. It has a lot of the functionality, the core functionality of the full version of MathCAD. However, certain like the built-in functions are locked away. Certain elements, constructs within MathCAD like solve blocks are locked away as well. There's actually a chart that we can see online. Let's get to it. There we go. And if I were just to see MathCAD prime comparison in here, we can see that we've got a comparison chart here. So if you were to look into this website onto the PTC site, you can see, here you go. So we can see what we have, the green ticks for functionality, and then elements that are locked away. So an important one here then is content protection, that is locked away in the full, until you get the full version. However, just a note on that, you can download and trial the full version of MathCAD for 30 days. So that's always worth noting and just having a go with it to see if it does benefit your organization. Is there any other questions?
Yeah, I think we might have time for another one. So we are looking to upgrade to Prime from version 15. Are there any considerations to make first?
Okay, yeah, another good question there. Yes, definitely. Unfortunately, during the shift from Windows XP to Windows 7, the actual core code of the software got changed. So the the files from MathCAD 15 have to be converted first with a converter that comes with Prime in order to be opened by Prime, because the file format's got slightly changed. So that would be a consideration. You have to convert the files to Prime versions. The converter generally does a good job of that. The math comes through fine, but there's some elements, maybe some text formatting, maybe there's fonts in previous versions that aren't in the new version that you may have to deal with. Or, for example, like the display of certain operators have changed from version to version. But in general, the math is pretty robust during the conversion. So that would be the main consideration to make. Other than that, there's obviously the difference in the UIs, but it's still MathCAD at the end of the day.
Yes, and I think it's something that, you know, we can always help you out with that transition.
Oh yes. We do this for customers as well. We help with that transition if you need it, and help, you know, organising it and running through, because some companies may have thousands upon thousands of worksheets, you know, so we can also help with the organisation and processing of those data sheets as well.
Okay, thank you again, Adam. That looks like that's all we've got time for. I have noted the other questions that have come in, so don't panic if we got thrown to yours. We will get in touch with you directly on those. And be sure to look out for other webinars of this nature. You can stay informed, as mentioned, by subscribing to our blog or connecting with us on LinkedIn or Facebook, or simply keeping an eye on our website. So we've got a Career Fire sneak peek coming up on the 21st of March. We're going to be looking at the new CFD extension on the 18th of April, and we're going to have a look at some simulators and improving your product quality on the 16th of May. So I'd like to thank you all again for participating, and do enjoy the rest of your day.